Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Business Communication. This is week 3. So we're doing unit 3. And we're going to talk about problems. Problems that people have at work. So far, we've done introductions, which was unit 1. And last week, we did work and leisure, talking about work and time after work and how you spend your time after work. So we're going to do a quick review first of Unit 2, and then we'll get into talking about problems. So for a quick review of last week's unit, for vocabulary, we talked about common phrases to use when talking about work. Things like high salary, if you make a lot of money, job security, knowing that your job is safe, you will not lose your job easily. Going on a business trip, for example, if you have a lot of travel opportunities at work, maybe you go on lots of business trips to other cities in Korea or maybe to other countries. So again, here's our chart here, our list of vocabulary words for talking about work on the left. And then over on the right, we have vocabulary for talking about leisure and what you do in your free time. We've got some collocations here. So things that you play, places that you go to, and things that you might watch. So many business people play golf. My family and I, we like to go to restaurants. And I know many students like to watch YouTube these days, especially videos like this one. So we've got, again, key vocabulary from Unit 2 is here. Just a quick reminder, we will use some of these in today's lesson. So I just wanted to remind you about some of those keywords. On this slide, we have a quick reminder, a review of the grammar that we learned last week. So again, our prepositions with time. So in the fall, in the afternoon, in the evening. Also with months, in June. And we had at night. And then for on, we talked about using on the weekend and on a specific day like Thursday. So on Thursday, on Monday, etc. And on a specific date on January 1st, for example. My birthday is on January 11th, for example. We also reviewed this present simple to talk about your habits and routines. So, for example, I travel on business. He attends meetings. They don't work late. And we finally reviewed adverbs of frequency because we often use these to talk about how often you do something. So, for example, I frequently travel on business, or I often travel on business. He rarely attends meetings, or maybe he seldom attends meetings. And they usually don't work late. They almost never work late. They usually don't work late. Okay, so that sums up our review of vocabulary and grammar from Unit 2. And now let's move into Unit 3. Okay, today's topic is problems, and specifically problems people have at work. So we've got some key vocabulary here. And on the left, you have a list of 8 common problems that people face at work. We'll go through those first. So, number 1, always being busy. Some people's jobs are very busy, so they have no free time, no downtime to relax or rest. They are busy all day. Number 2, difficult customers. If you work with customers, they are not always nice. Sometimes they give you problems, and we can call those customers difficult customers. Number 3, changes to orders. If you have a job where you take orders from customers, maybe they place an order with you and then they change it after you do the work. So that can be a problem. Number 4, computer crashes. If your computer maybe is old or doesn't have enough memory and you do try to do too much with it, maybe it will crash. That can be a big problem. You can lose your work if your computer crashes. Number 5 is kind of related to number 2. Maybe you deal with lots of rude people at work. This could be customers or maybe also your colleagues. Maybe there are rude colleagues in your office. So that can be stressful. Number 6, missing documents. You had a special document and suddenly you need it and suddenly it's gone. You can't find it. It's missing. So missing documents can be a problem at work. Number 7, delivery delays. If you are shipping a product to a customer and it gets delayed for some reason. Maybe the truck had a problem, maybe the item got lost and you're trying to find it. Delivery delays can be a problem. Also, if you ordered something for your business and you need it now and it got delayed, that can be a problem. So delivery delays can work both ways. And finally, number 8, we have machinery, and I added here equipment not working. So any kind of, if you're in a factory, maybe you have some big machines. If those don't work, that's a problem. If you work in an office, maybe your copy machine or printer or computer isn't working. So those are all common problems. Now, over on the right, we're going to use the words to and enough to talk about problems. And if you look, I put number 1 in green because I'm using always being busy as an example here with to. So I am always busy at work. That means there are too many customers, there's too much work to do, and I don't have enough time to do my work. So to, you're saying there's a lot of something, and enough you're using here with a negative. I don't have enough time. I need more time. I don't have enough time to do my work because I'm too busy. All right, and then for the next example, I used number 8, machinery not working. And so for this example, I'm talking about our printer. At work, our printer is not working. The printer is too old, maybe. Maybe it's too old. Maybe we need a new printer. Or maybe the problem is the ink and there isn't enough ink in the printer. Maybe we need more ink in the printer. So again, too much of something, and enough we use with a negative to say we need more. We are lacking something. Okay, so that sums up the vocabulary with problems at work, and we're going to look at some grammar in the next slide. Okay, grammar for today's lesson. We're going to focus on a little word, but a very useful word, and that is do. the verb do, to do something. And I put it in a heart because I love this verb because it is so useful. It's small, but super useful and super important in English. So it's important to know how to use this verb and to use it correctly. I put a little reminder here down in the little text box of how to conjugate the verb do. So if you remember, I, you, we, they do, he, she, it does for present tense. And we're going to focus on 2 ways to use do in this unit. Number 1 is to make the simple present negative of most verbs. So if you have no money, you can say, I don't have any money. I don't have any money. The next one, our company doesn't have parking facilities. You'll remember parking facilities was a vocabulary word last week. So that's an area or a place to park your car. And maybe this company is downtown in a tall office building and they don't have parking facilities for their employees. And the third example is my boss doesn't go on business trips very often. My boss doesn't go on business trips very often. So my boss is a he or she, so I used does, doesn't go on business trips. Number 2, we also use this to make questions, simple present tense questions. And in that case, if it's a yes or no question, do or does will go right at the beginning of your question. For example, do you have many problems at work? In my case, I can say no, thankfully. I don't have many problems at work. The next one, does your boss, again, that's a he or she, one person, so does your boss help you? Yes, in my case, my boss helps me a lot. And the last one, our subject is your colleagues, which is they, so we're going to use do. Do your colleagues like their jobs? And again, I can answer, yes, my colleagues love their jobs. They love teaching students at Gimcheon University. You can also use do or does to make open-ended questions with the WH question words that we learned about last week or the week before. So for example, why do you have many problems at work? Or when does your boss help you? Or why do your colleagues like their jobs? So you can see why do is such an important verb, and it's important to know how to conjugate it and how to use it, because communication is all about asking and answering questions. And so you need to be able to ask questions, and you'll need do for that. And of course, you'll need it to answer questions as well. So we've now talked about our vocabulary for this unit and our grammar. And in the next few slides, we're going to look at the reading activity, and we're going to combine the vocabulary and the grammar and even some of the vocabulary from previous units to talk about the reading activity texts. We'll do that next. Okay, this reading text was taken from your textbook, and that is on page 24 of your textbook. Um, in the textbook on page 24, there are 3 short texts, and they are written by employees, by workers who are talking about their jobs and complaining about some problems that they have. So we're going to look at this one in detail and then practice asking some questions and making some sentences to talk about what the problems are using the vocabulary and grammar we learned in the previous 2 slides. So let's read this one together. For now, just focus on the text under reply 1 here. Don't look it over on the right at the questions and answers. So at our call center, 150 agents work in one large room. A lot of them are women or students. The workstations are very close together, so it's very noisy. We wear headphones, but they're not good enough. I'm only 21, but my doctor says I have hearing problems. Sitting at a workstation for many hours causes other health problems. Most of my colleagues have backache. I often get headaches from looking at the computer screen for too long. And this was written by Birgit, who is from Stuttgart, Germany. She works in a call center, which is a huge open room usually, where people sit at desks and take phone calls. I'm sure you have called a call center before. I worked in a call center once many years ago, and it was terrible. Probably the worst job I've ever had. Very stressful. Lots of problems in a call center. Nobody calls you when they're happy. They only call when they are angry about something. All right, so let's practice using to, enough, and do and doesn't to make some questions and answer them. So the first question I ask here is, does Birgit like her job? Again, Birgit is a woman, so she. Does she like her job? And of course we can say, no, she doesn't. Now, second question, why doesn't she like her job? Why doesn't she like her job? Well, there are many reasons. One thing we can say is it's too crowded. She says there are lots of people and the workstations are close together. So it's too crowded. It's also too noisy. She says it's very noisy. She has to sit for too long, right? She sits at her workstation for many hours. Workstation is like your desk and computer and chair and the whole area where you sit and do your work. And also her equipment isn't good enough. Speaking of her headphones, right? Her headphones are not good enough. And also her computer screen, I think, is not very good. She needs something to help with her eye strain. All right, my third question is, what health problems do Birgit and her colleagues have? And they have many. So we talked about backaches from sitting too long, hearing problems because it's too noisy, and headaches from looking at the computer screen for too long. And finally, I ask, why does Birgit have hearing problems? And that's because her office is too loud and her headphones aren't good enough. So you can see there how useful to, enough, and do and doesn't are just from that one short paragraph. We were able to ask lots of questions and give lots of good information because we can use the vocabulary and grammar properly. So we're going to look at one more of these in detail, and we'll do that in the next slide. Okay, we're going to look at one more of these complaint letters in detail, and that is reply to. Again, if you're following along in your book, that's page 24. The top of the page, reply 2. This is from Vijay, who is 27 years old, and he lives in Mumbai, India. So we'll read it and then make some questions and practice answering using to, enough, do, and doesn't. And one good thing for you to do as you read is to notice when you see those words in the text. When does Vijay here use to or enough, or do or doesn't? When do you see those in the text? So let's read reply 2. Vijay says, the job is well paid, but the hours are long. We work 9 hours a day, but we often work overtime. The call center is a long way from my home. It takes me 2 hours to commute to work. So my real working day is often 13 hours. Difficult customers are another problem. Our customers in the UK are often very rude. It's not easy to talk to customers when they're angry and don't want to understand. A lot of my colleagues want to leave and find another job, but it's not easy to find such well-paid work. Okay, this is a little different from reply 1. Reply 1 didn't have any positive things at all. Reply 2 here, Vijay, his job does have one big positive. And that relates to my first question, which is, does Vijay make enough money? Yes, he does. He makes enough money. He says in the first sentence, the job is well paid, which means he makes quite a bit of money. He's happy with his pay. But that is the only good thing, it seems. So question 2, what complaints do Vijay and his colleagues have? You'll notice I used do here because it's Vijay and his colleagues. In number 1, I did does because I'm only talking about Vijay. Now I'm talking about Vijay and his colleagues, and that is the same as using they. And we know they takes do. They do they. So what complaints do they, Vijay and his colleagues, have? And their biggest complaint is about time. So their commute is too long. If you don't know what a commute is, that is when you go back and forth between a place. So we often use it to talk about work or maybe school. So a place that you go regularly and you have to travel a little bit to get there. So I live in Daegu, but I work in Gimcheon. So I have a long commute. Although because of Corona, I have a very short commute. I just have to walk a few steps to my office in my apartment. Okay, so that's one thing. It also says they work too many hours. So Vijay says we work 9 hours a day, but we often work overtime. So that means they are working too many hours. Their other big complaint has to do with their customers. They have too many difficult customers. It says they are often very rude and angry. So another way we can say that is that their customers are not nice enough. They are not nice enough. So there are too many difficult customers. The customers are not nice enough. So we used both too and enough to describe the customers there. And finally, why don't Vijay and his colleagues find another job? At the end of the letter here, he says, a lot of my colleagues want to leave and find another job, but it's not easy to find such well-paid work. So why don't they just leave? They don't like these long commutes. They don't like their long hours. They don't like the rude customers. So why don't they just leave? It says, so let's see if we can use to and enough to explain why they don't leave. So one thing is there is a lack of well-paid jobs. Right? This job pays very well. It's hard to find jobs that pay this well. So we can say there aren't enough well-paid jobs available. If they leave this job, it will be difficult to find another one that pays this much. And another way we could say this is that the pay or salary at this job is too good to give up. If they leave, they will not find another job with pay that is this good. So the pay at this job is too good to give up. Okay, so now we have looked and analyzed two of these complaint messages, and there is one more. So let's take a quick look at that one in the next slide. All right, now for this slide, reply 3, this is the last one. We'll read it together, and then you'll notice that it is pretty blank over on the right-hand side of this slide, and that's because I helped you with the first two. Now it's going to be your turn. In your notebook, or if you want to use your computer, open up a Word document, and I'd like you to practice writing some questions using do or does, some questions about this short text, and some answers using do or does and to and enough. So let's read together first, and then I'll leave it to you to do the work. So reply 3, this is from Kevin, who is Australian. A lot of the work in a call center is very boring. You do the same job day after day. On a typical day, each of us takes up to 200 calls. We're often on the phone for 4 or more hours continuously. Most of the calls are complaints, and we're expected to solve each problem within 2 minutes. When one call finishes, another call starts immediately. You don't get time to think. It's very stressful. Another problem is there's no possibility of promotion. It's just a job. It's not a career. Nobody stays in the job very long. So the company is constantly recruiting and training new staff. Okay, so there's lots happening in this text that will give you a good opportunity to write lots of questions and to talk about the problems that Kevin and his colleagues have at their call center. This sounds similar to the call center where I worked. 200 calls in one day. And when one call finishes, another call starts immediately. Yes, I do remember that. It was not fun at all. Okay, so I look forward to seeing what you came up with for your questions and answers. Again, using do and don't, and does and doesn't, and to and enough. Okay, so that brings us to the end of today's lesson. Again, we talked about problems at work today, and we started by listing several of the problems that people commonly have in their jobs. Things like difficult customers, or problems with equipment or machines, always being busy, not having enough time, etc. We also discussed to and enough and how to use those words to talk about complaints. So, for example, I'm too busy at work, or I don't have enough time to do my work. We also discussed using do, the verb do, don't and doesn't, do and does, to ask questions and to make um, present simple negative statements. Then we went through some examples using the reading text on page 24 in your textbook, and we analyzed the complaints that two of those employees had, and we practiced making some questions using do and answering those questions and talking about the problems using to and enough. And then I gave you the third one was for you to do on your own and to make your own questions and give your own answers using to and enough. And that brings us to our homework. So your next steps. So number one, of course, is the same as always. Leave a comment under this video on YouTube. Again, that is your attendance. If your comment is not there, there is no way to know that you were here in class. So please leave a short comment under this video. And in your comment, why don't you tell me about a problem that you're having recently or that you've had recently? Could be related to work if you have a part-time job, or maybe it's something related to school and you're doing your schoolwork online. But that would be good if you could leave a little comment about a problem that you're having these days as your attendance. All right, then of course do the textbook homework, which is Unit 3. I put that on Canvas, so you can find that there as well. So go through Unit 3, do the activities in the unit, and finally, there is another online discussion that is also on Canvas. And in this discussion, you're going to continue just like the previous ones. You are 40 years old, you have a job and a family, and now you're going to talk about the problems that you have at work in your job. So before you start writing, think deeply about the job you have. Remember, you're 40 years old, you're working, you have a certain job. Make a list. What are some possible problems that a person who does this job would have day to day? Are they problems with equipment? Are there problems with customers? Are there problems with colleagues? What types of problems are common? And if you don't know, right, you're not really 40 years old, so you haven't actually done this job yet, so you might not know what those problems are. In that case, do a search online and find out what types of problems people have when they do that job. Try to come up with at least 5 big problems that people have. This unit is actually considered a makeup unit, so I will send you a message on Kakao about the due date for this discussion. It's going to be usually discussions are due on Friday, but because this is a makeup unit, the due date is going to be a little bit different. So watch our Kakao chat room for details on when this discussion will be due. All right, and as always, if you have any questions, please send me a message on Kakao. and I look forward to seeing you again soon. Bye. 감사합니다.